Bast Insider here says Aphantasia makes these interactions.
Aphantasia.
Is that the inability? Thank you.
You're
Is that the
welcome.
inability to
Not
picture things visually in your head?
Yes. So there's a really, really good study on aphantasia. Rachel Hine, who is my co-host on Nerdist Book Club, has aphantasia. And it was
Neat.
so interesting to learn because my brain I can detail things to the nth degree. And it was interesting seeing how, again, we read the same words, but our brains would build very different pictures. Hers was black, empty, and mine was like detailed. And then Hector Navarro, who I also did the show with, would see things as if he was the director. And so he was seeing it from a third person point of view, building out the scene. And I think all of them are fascinating.
Of all the people in Murderbot, I picture Murderbot least because I'm riding around behind Murderbot's eyes. I'm not seeing Murderbot. I am seeing out from Murderbot. And it's the same. This is a weird comparison, but as a writer, I can see all of the characters in my book. I see Kvothe least because it's all first person.
Not me.
I mean, everybody else
see
gets
him
to
in my
imagine
dreams. No.
But also I have some face blindness, so I'm a weird.
So how do you picture things? So the aphantasia or aphantasia study is there are 4 diagrams, and it says picture an apple. And there's 4 different apples ahead. One is it's a blank page. There is absolutely, you just cannot picture this apple. The second one, it is a white outline of a very simple apple.
It's a shape, okay. The realm of icon.
The next one is kind of like the Apple logo. So you can understand that it's a red apple, but it's still somewhat 2-dimensional. It might have a bit of shade behind it. And then the last apple is this 3-dimensional, very realistic looking apple. And when we did this test, I was like, I can fucking smell this apple. I can tell you the crunch that it makes when I pierce my teeth through that skin. Like this is how I can go. And then Rachel's just like, there's nothing.
Well, hold on, because I don't know this. Do people with aphantasia, do they not have sense memory of taste or smell?
I don't know.
I always thought it was only visual. Because like when I am writing, what would frequently happen when I would go to the mountain and I'd be doing it, and then a lot of times I get up and I go into the kitchen and I'm like, oh, it's not raining, or I'd be like, oh, it's daytime. Mm-hmm. Oh, it's not winter.
So you're placing it.
I was somewhere else. It was all of that. Mm-hmm. Now, my face blindness, I think, is a different thing in the brain that makes it hard to recognize. By the way, if anyone is looking, if you dig weird brain stories, The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat is amazing. And it's named after the case study of the person who, like his wife brought him in and she's like, my husband has, and he's like in his late 60s. He's a professor of music, a prestigious, like world-renowned, respected professor at the university, and brings her husband in. It's like, yeah, my husband has trouble. And they do a vision test. He tests his reflex. He gives them one. So it's like, well, I'm not seeing a lot here, but if you're saying there's problems, maybe if I come and see him at home. Mm. And then what happens is it's like, okay, cool. And what happened is the man stands up and he goes, and then he looks at his wife and he puts his hands around the top of his wife's head. And he goes like this. And then he's like, and he's confused, and he goes like this, and then he's like, and then his wife hands him his hat, and he's like, right. And that's the story, is The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat. And then he goes and observes this person in his home, because there's obviously perceptual things going on, but he can see fine. Huh. It's just that he was like, and it's absolute, everyone who cares enough to sit all the way through our weird eclectic discussion of humanity and perception and mental everything, you gotta check this book out. It's so amazing. What he was doing is he looked at her and he's like, I'm looking for my hat. And that's what a hat is to do with this. This is a head. hat is, and so he's like, here, it goes on, no, where is, it's
on his own
here.
head?
And so what happened, just one more piece of this story. Yeah, he's connecting concepts, but he can't remember the name of it verbally, and he can't, so he goes over to his house, and the doctor gave him things and said, what's this? And so he looked, he goes, oh, and and he says, this is a piece of fabric enfolded upon itself, stitched together with several differently shaped irregular pockets. And he goes, do you have any idea what it could be for? And he goes, it could be a purse, and each of these pockets is for a different type of coin. And he goes, oh, that's it. It's like, anything else you think? He goes, well, and he kind of talks about it. And then eventually, like, the conversation moves on. And then he goes, oh, it's a glove. But he could not visually identify it. That's it, right? You got to read this, Maude. It'll knock you over. It'll knock you over. And what I love most is that at the end of telling this story, this person who is a world-renowned neurobiologist, that's all of the weirdest shit gets filtered to him because he's at the top. At the end of it, he talked to the man's wife and he goes, you know what? He goes, I think, and observed him in his whatever. His students would come up to him. He wouldn't recognize them at all because he had no facial but as soon as they spoke, because he taught voice, as soon as they spoke, he's like, I know your name, I know everything about you. But the face was nothing. It was invisible. It was less than invisible. At the end of it, what he said was, he's like, this guy, he can't do some of what we do. That's no big deal at all. He gets through his life. He does what he loves. He's good at his job. He is happy. There's nothing wrong with this man. And I'm like, damn, like, he's playing a different game. He got different wires, but like, what a beautiful way. What a beautiful way. And like, there's several of these studies, and maybe it's a little fluffy for people who are like into hardcore neurophysiology. But I love the fact that he met a person who could not form new memories for the last 30 years. And at the end, when he's sort of discussing what he thinks, he talks about the nature of the soul. And I'm like, come at me. Like, don't it's not all acetylcholine. Talk to me about a soul, dude.
Yeah.
Like, let's have a big conversation.
Mm-hmm. A face is a part of a soul. It's not everything. Yeah. I hear you. Yeah, that's gorge. It's so interesting to hear and see how people see differently. Back to the aphantasia study, what really fucked me up was that I use sort of my inner mind to draw, and my subconscious will literally pull from images that I have seen or witnessed or been a part of for over decades. And it's usually video games or books or movies. When I did that same Apple test and my eyes were shut and I had to physically see it behind my eyes using the back of my eyelids as a canvas, out of the 4 examples, I was number 2.
Right.
It was just a white outline.
When you were describing it, I'm like, hold on, that's not visual. What you just said, and I think maybe that's it for me, because I'm imagining experiential things. But again, when people are like, what's up with Denna? And I'm like, well,
she's a brunette. She's a brunette.
Yep.
She's a brunette. But let me tell you 5 things about her personality like that, though,